Welcome back, everyone. Again, I'm here as Berylyn Moore, Principal Social Worker for Greenwich, with our independent chair of the SAB board, Michael Preston Shute, and we're just having conversations around some of the themes relating to SARS safeguarding adult reviews. And in this particular section, Michael, we want to talk about your national role. So even though you're our independent chair for the SAB, you have a national role, which I would like you to tell us about, and also what's happening on the national arena wider than Greenwich with other local authorities, in your view, about some of the themes around the SARS.
Okay, well, hello again, everybody. For the last 5 years, I've been either the joint convener or the sole convener of the National Network for Safeguarding Adult Board Chairs. And in that role, I represent all 136 Safeguarding Adult Boards in England in meetings with civil servants in the Department of Health and Social Care, the Home Office, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and the Ministry of Justice. And I also work closely with the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services and indeed with colleagues in NHS England. So I'm able to represent the issues and the concerns, as well as the achievements of safeguarding adult boards and partner agencies in those high-level strategic meetings. I've also been the principal investigator for both the first and the second national analysis of safeguarding adult reviews in England. So the reviews completed between 2017 and 2019, and reviews completed between 2019 and 2023. The reports of those two national analyses you can find on the Local Government Association website, on the adult safeguarding pages of the Local Government Association, which is lga.gov.uk. Those national analyses made some recommendations to national government for improving the law and the statutory guidance that surrounds adult safeguarding in England. And we await a formal government response to those service improvement priorities, which we felt only government could address rather than individual safeguarding adult boards across England. We also have a facility to escalate concerns from individual safeguarding adult reviews to the Department of Health and Social Care. We have escalated a number of concerns from individual safeguarding adult reviews recently. And again, we are awaiting a response from the Department of Health and Social Care. Meanwhile, the National Network for Safeguarding Adult Board Chairs, and indeed the National Network for Business Managers of Safeguarding Adult Boards, of which Helen Bonnewell is a member, are undertaking some work to identify best practice in relation to disseminating and ensuring the learning from safeguarding adult reviews, and indeed for identifying what best practice looks like in adult safeguarding across 4 domains: direct practice, team around the person, organisational support for practitioners and managers, and SAB, Safeguarding Adult Board Governance. That work will be completed by the end of this year. And the National Network for SAB Chairs actually has a website, nationalnetwork.org.uk, and the outcome of that work will be posted on the website just as soon as we can in early 2026. So what are the key themes that arise from all of that work? I'll identify a few, but I encourage you once again to look at the full reports which are available on the Local Government Association adult safeguarding pages. One key theme is about equality, diversity, and inclusion. What we know from Safeguarding Adult reviews is that far too little consideration is given to the protected characteristics outlined in the Equality Act 2010. So how are we recognizing protected characteristics across race, culture, sexuality, disability, gender, age, religion, and faith, for example? Are we sure that we are responding as we should to the requirements within the Equality Act 2010? So think about your contribution to equality, diversity, and inclusion. A second key theme is making safeguarding personal. Very often people appear to be interpreting making safeguarding personal as simply identifying what an individual wishes, what an individual might feel, or the desired outcomes that an individual might be voicing. But actually making safeguarding personal is more than that. It includes, for example, us contributing our reflections on the wishes and the desired outcomes that a person is voicing, and perhaps sharing some of our thoughts on desired outcomes that we might encourage an individual to consider. Because what we know, not least from experiences of domestic abuse, but I'll use that as the example, that when you are on the receiving end of physical and or emotional violence, the outcomes that you think are possible narrow. And our role is to try to open up possibilities that an individual through their lived experience might have thought were impossible to think about or indeed to realize and achieve. A third key theme about direct practice amongst many is professional curiosity and the lack of it. Here I often like to think about professional curiosity as compassionate inquiry. How does the individual come to be the individual that we experience today? What might that individual be experiencing about our efforts to support and to safeguard them? What might an individual have experienced historically about services and about relationships that are being offered that appear to be helpful? What might the individual have taken from the outcome of those experiences into our exchanges today? What might be preventing or raising obstacles for that individual in engaging with us today? Can we share those reflections? Whether those reflections are about fear, about stigma, about loss of control, what might actually be barriers for a person engaging with us? And can we think through the expression of compassionate inquiry or professional curiosity, can we think of ways in which we might be able to open up over time conversations about what might enable an individual to respond to what we are offering? Having conversations of professional curiosity or compassionate inquiry are challenging for us. I can well remember when I was a practicing social worker many decades ago that I knew that I should be having what I anticipated were going to be difficult conversations with people. And I sadly reflect that on occasion I bottled out. I didn't have the courage. I didn't have the confidence to actually have the conversations that I know I needed to have. So when we are anticipating conversations that might be complex, that might be challenging, that might be difficult, when we reflect that we might not have the knowledge, the skills, or indeed the confidence or courage to have those conversations, to whom do we turn for support? To enable us to prepare as well as we can, and to enable us to have conversations afterwards about what happened, positive or otherwise. So let's reflect some more about professional curiosity. There are challenges too about mental capacity routinely coming up. And we know that the Mental Capacity Act Code of Practice is not fit for the challenges that we encounter in 2025. But we also know that even when practitioners have been trained to do capacity assessments, they can appear daunting. So again, to whom do you turn to enable you to prepare for the kind of capacity assessment that you are about to conduct? And to whom do you turn afterwards to talk you through what actually happened? And to think in capacity assessments not just about what a person says, but to reflect on what a person does or does not do. In other words, to reflect on what we are increasingly understanding as executive capacity or executive functioning. Because sometimes the part of the brain that controls what we say is different from the part of the brain that controls what we do. And the impact of trauma, adverse experiences, fear, embarrassment, shame can actually prevent us from doing what actually we know we should be doing. In terms of how services work together, we need to strengthen how we come together to demonstrate a whole system, whole person response. We need to be using much more frequently than we are multi-agency meetings. So when you reflect on your own lived experience of work, how easy do you find it to convene and to contribute to multi-agency meetings? And if you don't find it easy, why might that be? It might be because we haven't provided you with a framework within which to locate your practice, or it might be that you don't know how to set up a meeting if the responsibility rests with you, or you don't know what to do when another service whose contributions you need is refusing to participate. So reflect about your lived experience of working collaboratively. Where are the enablers? What enables that collaboration to happen? And where are the obstacles or barriers? And who knows about the obstacles or barriers? Because your supervisors and your operational managers, your principal social worker in Berlin need to know when you are striving to get collaboration across services and you're experiencing challenges. Do not forget the provisions in Section 42 of the CARE Act and the duty to make adult safeguarding concern referrals and the duty on the local authority, where appropriate, to conduct adult safeguarding inquiries with a view to producing an adult safeguarding plan. And then finally, who looks after you? What organizational support do you receive in order to be the best practitioner that you can be? To whom do you turn routinely for talking about the complex and challenging situations that you encounter? What support do you receive? What guidance do you receive? What we know nationally is that that remains far too variable.
Thank you, Michael, for those reflections nationally. Few things resonated for me was about the importance of that supervisory relationship and the supervision offer, and environment. It's really key for practitioners and professionals to explore some of those tensions, some of those difficulties. And it's interesting, even some of the little examples that you gave about people maybe not wanting to set up something that's multi-agency in terms of an approach to support a person they're working with, but actually the agency may not wanting to be part of that, but you feel that they should be. You know, that does resonate with me in some of the adult safeguarding adult reviews, and also thinking about areas about escalating things. How do you know, having that opportunity to escalate to a senior level, so that if you're not getting the collaboration and the buy-in that you want as a practitioner on your day-to-day, how do you, who does that remain with? How do you make sure you're escalating it and not just saying, you know what, oh well, I'll do the best, I'll muddle through the best that I can. I think those are some of the key things that do resonate when I think about our work around safeguarding adults. It's interesting that you talked about the EDI angle and element. I was on the session where we were looking at the 5 SARS, and I guess I was intrigued because I know that I just wanted to know whether there were any themes around ethnicity, diversity and inclusion around some of the SARS nationally and our local SARS. Is there any pattern or trend? Are we seeing that actually there are some groups of people that are more neglected than others, or is it fair to say, this sounds horrible, that everyone's equally neglected?
I was for quite a number of years the independent chair in the London Borough of Lewisham. And one of the striking themes of all of the most of the safeguarding adult reviews that we completed in Lewisham when I was independent chair was they all focused on Black British, Black African, Black Caribbean men experiencing severe mental distress living in the community, and the shortcomings in how services were working with those individuals. And indeed, we have identified that, albeit to a lesser degree, in the SARS in Greenwich, the same issue about how we are supporting people with mental distress in the community, many of whom are Black British, Black African or Black Caribbean. We also know, not least through the summit that we held on homelessness, that homelessness is an issue that affects not just men, but also women. And women may experience homelessness and respond to homelessness differently from how men respond. And the services need to address the specific needs of women experiencing homelessness, as well as needs more generally. We also know, and indeed have a project being led by Healthwatch for the Safeguarding Adult Board, that we have far fewer referrals of adult safeguarding from global majority communities in Greenwich. We need to understand much more clearly what the barriers might be to people within different global majority communities in Greenwich raising safeguarding issues. And I look forward to the completion of that Healthwatch project in early 2026. So I think that covers some of the issues in relation to EDI that you've quite rightly brought up. You're on mute.
I knew that was going to happen at some point. I'm clicking the wrong button. Can I just ask about executive functioning in mental capacity? This is my thoughts. I'm not sure that professionals and practitioners understand that concept.
And I would agree with you that based on the learning from SARS across England, there is a lack of understanding about executive functioning or uncertainty about how to include it within mental capacity assessment. So to deal with the second of those 2 points first, the starting point for a mental capacity assessment is, can a person understand, retain and use or weigh what is being talked about in order to make a decision. And when you come to the retain and use or weigh, if you are assessing capacity of a particular issue where there is a repetitive pattern of behavior, that is, I think, where executive functioning has a particular contribution to make. So, for example, there may be things that an individual says. Yes, I know how to keep myself safe, for example. Yes, I know I should reduce my reliance on alcohol or other drugs. Yes, I know I should do A, B, or C. But the repetitive pattern indicates that the individual does not do that.
Yeah.
Then the capacity assessment needs to include a conversation about why that might be. Can the individual retain and use or weigh the concerns that the assessor feeds back about, well, we had this conversation before, or this has been an issue around for you for a period of time. Why are we still where we are? And what we know, for example, about prolonged misuse of substances, prolonged alcohol dependence, or prolonged dependence on other drugs, is that it can affect the frontal lobe of the brain. What we know about trauma, both significant one-off trauma events, but also what we know about ongoing trauma, often captured within the phrase post-traumatic stress disorder, is that those experiences affect the frontal lobe of the brain. And the frontal lobe of the brain is what controls our behavior. A different part of the brain controls what we say. So what we need to include in our capacity assessments, and why we need a revised code of practice for mental capacity assessments that adequately reflects this, is that we need to look at real world observation, not just to rely on what an individual says. On YouTube, there is an excellent video made by Ellie Atkins, who is a social worker working with people experiencing homelessness and addictions in Manchester, where she explains what executive functioning is. And she uses a particular case study in order to explain it in practice detail. So I would encourage people to access YouTube and Ellie Atkins talking about executive functioning.
Thanks, Michael. And just finally, just thinking about those SAR reviewers that I've seen that reported back, I did note and reflect that they were mainly white males or white females. And I was wondering, is that the common characteristics nationally? And what can be done to ensure there is more diversity with different people with different lived experience being part of carrying out SAR reviews?
At the moment, the vast majority of reviewers are white British or white Irish. There are far fewer reviewers drawn from different global majority communities. There is a programme currently run by the Social Care Institute for Excellence, offering training for people who wish to engage in safeguarding adult reviews. And that's one mechanism for widening the pool of reviewers, and particularly the pool of reviewers drawn from different global majority communities. But we've much more to do in that area. And I would strongly encourage people who are senior leaders, people who have senior operational management and leadership positions, including yourself, to think about whether either as part of your role or indeed if you were to leave your role and set up independently, you might engage in reviews, because you're quite right. We need a diversity of experience. We do quite well in terms of diversity of professional backgrounds: social workers, healthcare practitioners, former police officers. So in terms of diversity of experience and diversity of professional background, we do quite well. But we don't do as well as we could in relation to people from global majority communities.
That's really helpful and interesting to know that there is training available around SAR reviews, because it might be a development opportunity that, as you say, wider variety of people might be interested in. And I also know that there are different formats for doing the SAR review. It does, obviously, one of the things I'd mentioned to Helen as our SAB manager was around the length of time that SARs take, and sometimes we have these really big reports, but actually Helen's also done a small report, and it's like, you know, how do you decide what the format is? And because if it's a smaller report, maybe someone else might be able to do that or want an opportunity to do that as part as a learning exercise. So yeah, just your thoughts about that.
Well, we're trying to ensure that we build on prior learning. We don't simply repeat it. So where we get new referrals in relation to abuse or neglect that we have reviewed before, we try to think creatively about, well, how do we build on the prior learning? How do we ensure that previous recommendations have led to positive outcomes for practice and for the management of practice? And sometimes we might conclude to do a review in-house rather than to commission an independent reviewer, because we think that that is the best way of building on prior learning, and it is the best way of getting learning out just as quickly as we can. So there might well be opportunities in future for people employed in one of the services that comprise the partnership for adult safeguarding in Greenwich. There might be an opportunity to contribute to such a review.
Thank you, Michael. And that brings us to the end of this podcast, this particular episode. Michael, have you got any closing comments or thoughts you'd like to make before we end?
Yes, read the materials that are on the Local Government Association website on the adult safeguarding pages, not just the reports of the 2 national analyses of SARS, but there's also a lot of material about making safeguarding personal, for example, about Section 42 of the Care Act and the duty to inquire. So the Local Government Association adult safeguarding pages are a rich resource for practitioners and managers.
That's very helpful. Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to conversing again at another episode.